I've never been to Ecuador, but it has been the largest contamination, even bigger than the Exxon Valdez, going over the span of, well, since the 60s to present day. They actually ended up losing a lawsuit in 2010 where they were mandated to pay $8 billion to the country of Ecuador for all the contamination that's taken place. Between then and now, the companies have transferred names, and they actually ended up handing over the oil industry down there to Ecuador. It was Petro Ecuador, I believe, and then it was bought out by Chevron. So Chevron became the big face of all this contamination going on, and they're the ones that the country finally went after. And what ended up happening is, of course, they started to liquidate all their assets once they lost the lawsuit. And so now they're being mandated to pay double that, $16 billion that they still haven't paid to this day because everything's caught up in litigation.
Exxon Valdez, Exxon hasn't paid.
Yeah, they still haven't paid theirs either.
But one last thing that I want to mention, though, we noticed this earlier in SAIYM. On the 29, very company, you might have heard of, kind of small little company, Halliburton. They're going to be on campus recruiting, next generation of Flinders. SUSJ, we have not discussed this, but some of us are going to maybe show up to their recruiting event, maybe hold a few of our signs, and kind of remind them that they're not going to have their way totally on campus. So if any of y'all are inclined on the 29th have time, please check out our Facebook page. We'll kind of update that. And feel free to hold a sign. We're going to kind of let them know that, thanks for that spill out there in the Gulf. We appreciate that.
That's Monday?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, there's posters all over.
Yeah, there's posters out there. So we're going to thank them for that BP spill.
So,
yeah, because they Halliburton owned the rig, correct?
they were the contractor. Yeah. Yeah, so they're definitely involved in the
Halliburton, I said, was the initial company with government funding, mind you, because it's okay with government funds, energy. Stop. But, exactly, we're students. But yeah, with government funding, Halliburton is the one who in the late 70s, 80s developed brand new technology. So like I said, we have a lot to thank them for, so this will really help us out.
I mean, and not to mention that they were a huge part of, a whole war, that went on for a long time. I don't know if y'all heard about the war in Iraq, but went in there and, they got a lot of money off of that, and, hundreds of thousands of civilians dead, thousands of troops died for a lie. So, not to mention that, I mean, the fact that these people are on our campus, I think is kind of insulting. So, to the name of all those troops that died, and to all those civilians who died, that's an insult. So, not only is it an insult to the good earth, but it's also an insult to a lot of people. So, hopefully you guys will feel the same way that we do.
Awesome. Also, in relation to the Ecuador situation, there's a great documentary called Crude. It's really amazing. I don't know if that was what you were talking about, but
Crude, Crude lays it all out.
Yeah.
It's an entire documentary from day one to whenever it was made.
But anyways, on to our next speaker, Rachel Tucker. She's a junior at UTSA, majoring in anthropology and minoring in Latin American studies and Spanish. She is an active member of SUSJ and was recently profiled by Conexión and elected as the female co-chair of the Bear Green Party. And tonight, Rachel will help James discuss climate justice issues. Thank you.
Thanks, guys, for being here. I do get a little nervous, so bear with me. I also made a little PowerPoint for us. Let me get this one. There we go. All right, so James talked about the macro sense of climate change, and I'm going to reiterate specifically what environmental racism and environmental justice really mean. So, from the dictionary, environmental racism is a strong correlation between heavily industrialized and polluted areas and race or color. And environmental justice comes from the fight of environmental racism, which environmental justice is the belief that everyone has a right to healthy living, which includes the foods they eat, the air they breathe, the soil they harvest on, and water they drink, and all the other human needs that the earth provides for us, as well as the right of good working conditions, which includes, for example, sanitation or sanitary working conditions, toxin and chemical-free work environments. Okay, so when I put this together, I really wanted to bring in a feminist view of this huge thing that is climate change. And one of the main things that I really like about this approach is how feminism sees all the intersectionalities between social problems and environmental problems, and which include how GMO foods affect people, pollution, consumerism, healthcare, education, family, and how all of those intersect to really with climate change and how people deal with these things. And so another thing is that women and children are the most vulnerable they're likely to, the women bear more witness to health impacts of toxic infrastructure on their community. Not to mention that women biologically have more fatty tissue than men, which if they are exposed to heavy contaminants, those fatty tissues retain all of these toxins in their body, and let's say that they are pregnant and they are breastfeeding, then those toxins that are stuck in hanging around in the woman's fatty tissues in their breast are passed on to the child. So that's awful. And here is one huge example of kind of a connection of what my friends over here have been talking about with how globalization and then like immigration has messed up places' economies, places' ways of living, and health specifically, and climate. This is the U.S.-Mexico border with the maquiladoras, which, if you guys familiar with the maquiladoras, so for those that aren't, they are basically huge factories that are manned by women, and as you can see in this picture, it is just like a crap ton of ladies working for low wages, and they are exposed to so many different types of fumes, so many different types of chemicals, and go home to this. And before they even see their children, they need to change. They need to change their clothes. They need to wash themselves with clean water, which they don't really have because the factories do have these they release a lot of chemical runoff. And the water, when it rains, it floods, and that's just a crazy contamination mess right there. But these ladies are exposed to these fumes, and they expose their children to these fumes and chemicals as well, which causes asthma, skin rashes, all sorts of diseases. Okay. In my opinion, I think that this aspect of climate change or environmental racism, is an expansion of colonization. Because colonization is a hostile takeover of valuable lands by the rich from the poor, others, for the exploitation and extraction of resources and enslavement of its people and for profits. And basically, translated today was a maquiladora. That's one in so many examples of how that takes place in our world today. This is a quote from Robert D. Bullard. He wrote an article called Poverty, Pollution, and Environmental Racism: The Systematic Destruction of Indigenous Peoples' Lands, the Sacred Sites, the Poisoning of Native Americans and Reservations, Africans in the Niger Delta, African Americans in the Louisiana Cancer Valley, Mexicans in the border towns and Puerto Ricans on the island of Vieques all have their roots in economic exploitation, racial oppression, devaluation of human life and the natural environment, and corporate greed. So here I have found some pictures that reflect the places that have been mentioned here. The first two up there are from Puerto Rico. The Vieques, that used to be, like it says there, a Navy base, which just like closed off its entire part of the island. Up on the right over there, I don't like what it says, but I thought it was powerful, so that's why I put it up. But in Nigeria, I don't know if you guys have heard recently, there has been like really, it was a Supreme Court case with, I don't really know the details, but there are human rights violations that happened with these oil companies over there. And there have been in 1 year, in this last year, there have been over 500 oil spills. And so these people are already lacking on clean water to survive. So imagine the devastation there. Okay, moving on. All right, and now I want to bring it closer to home. Unfortunately, for years at Kelly, you guys familiar with the Kelly contamination? Okay. All right, so one example here is the San Antonio Kelly USA, or now Port San Antonio, located on the west side, one of the poorest areas in town, whose residents are working class of Hispanic and indigenous descent. They are minorities, right? And are low income, which are like the two basic things that environmental racism has in its attack. Since there were decades of chemical runoff and dumping into the ground, which leaked into a small aquifer, while the base was still in operation, there has been a cluster of kidney and liver cancer, as well as birth defects in the area. Their drinking water is contaminated, and groups such as the Southwest Workers Union have been fighting for years to get some type of justice in this area. And so here you see like the disbursement of the water, the toxins. I mean, as we all know, and James was talking about, I mean, water is essential and it flows naturally. So how it leaks into our water streams that are connected to our rivers, that are connected to the oceans and lakes, and I mean, it turns into a global catastrophe. Also, you can see here the little purple crosses are little crosses which symbolize that somebody in that family has a family member that passed away from being contaminated with cancer that was caused by contamination. All right, Manchester. Another example is Manchester, and this neighborhood is a neighborhood in Houston that has been accumulating pollution from Valero refinery for 60 years now, and its residents are 90% Hispanic and also working class. Now, this is just appalling. So according to the Tar Sand Blockade website, Manchester is completely surrounded by industry. To the north and east is the Valero refinery with the Lyondell Basil refinery. To the southeast, Texas Petrochemical plant. To the south is the Rhodia Chemical plant and a trash shredding facility. To the west is the wastewater treatment facility. To the east, a Goodyear tire plant. To the southeast, along the Interstate 610 overpass, bisecting the community and the industrial rail yard, forming the community's southern perimeter. So this community is just dying, basically. This is absolutely a case of long existing environmental racism. As stated before, Manchester has been used and abused for years. In the early 2000s, 2000s, the city has assigned a pollution, was assigned a pollution monitor by the EPA due to the heavy amounts of benzene identified in the air, a cancer-producing chemical. Since many more chemicals have been detected in the area, registering as the highest in the state of Texas. One example is chloroform, considered a probable carcinogen that can host a lot of health effects. Some being dizziness all the way up to kidney damage and cancer and death. So yes, this area has been used and abused. And what has come out of this area is a lot of activism, a lot of environmental justice with the tar sands blockade, which that's our action was in solidarity with them. That we had here on Valero. And yes, like over here, this is a little kid playing right near open flame that is from the Valero refinery. That is just awful. Over here, there's this lady that is protesting the Keystone XL pipeline, and she chained herself to this tractor to try to stop this from happening in her neighborhood. And yeah, I mean, the effects are devastating, and I guess the thing that is, we can see that is positive about this is the solidarity, the unifying of the community, and standing up for our human rights of clean air and clean water. All right. And here, this is a quick overview of the West Virginia Appalachian mountaintop removal for coal mining. This lady over here, they shaved her heads in protest of the mountaintop removal. She's a part of the Keeper of the Mountains Foundation, and the shaving of the head symbolizes one, the mountaintop removal, and then two, what that industry has brought into, has brought disease into their community. So when you go through chemo, use paraphrase. You can also see up here the amount of mountaintop removals in a very historically poor area. And here's a before and after picture, which is awful. Okay. These are all examples of local battles and the formation of grassroots coalitions fighting environmental injustices all over the world. And this one is, I Don't Know More, is from Canada. They're a First Nations group from Canada. And as you can see in this map, the support, this is a 2-month kind of, I don't know what the word is. They've been in action for 2 months, and this is how much support they've got. And it is amazing. And this was taken in January, so imagine how much more this has spread throughout the world. Basically, as this little list says on the side, I Don't Know More means basically enough with the crap, you know. And they ask, sorry, the map illustrates the I Don't Know More Canadian First Nations movement 2 months into it. And they ask for land, life, language, culture, ceremony, governance, treaty, justice, equality, freedom, decolonization, and for their treaties to be honored, which has been a historical problem globally for any indigenous people. And that is something that really speaks to young people and old people all throughout the world that acknowledge their power. And I mean, that's the beauty about movements like this, is it's how
Thank you. So, if we can just have some quick responses if there are any to that.
I just wanted to talk about environmental racism real briefly. Basically, these companies, as she said, they're going into low-income neighborhoods and destroying those neighborhoods that they deem inferior, I suppose. So, if you can, get behind that. I don't know what to say. It's really awful.
Yeah, and just to touch on that, I think that that also falls back on the overall landscape of our country, which is that inequality that I discussed earlier. Because obviously, if you're overwhelmingly impacting poor communities, you're keeping them even more isolated, more segregated than they otherwise would be. So I think that we don't realize how those things, how that environmental hurting really affects inequality, but it does. It has an enormous effect on it. And I just think that, just on a basic economic level, if you think like in terms of that, it makes it easier to understand it and digest. So just think about it.
And I just want to add one more thing, because Manchester, we're just looking at there, the Keystone Pipeline, the ending point is right there. So just think about everything they've already been through or going through, how they're entirely surrounded by industry. Just imagine the Keystone gets put online. You start taking that tar, sludge, sand from Canada, transporting in that tube all the way from the northern states down to Dakota, Nebraska. Mind you, cutting through indigenous lands, treating, we don't respect that anyway. Private lands, they're taking this to eminent domain, some parts. Let's say that oil gets here and it dumps out. They have to separate the oil from the sludge, that clay junk. What are they going to do with that sludge and that leftover stuff? They're going to do what they always do. They're just going to dump it right in the water. I mean, just think about that. When, former NASA scientist James Hansen resigned from NASA to protest the Keystone XL, he said, if that goes online, it's game over. That's basically a planet. But can you imagine for Manchester? And that much sludge starts coming down that way?
And also, take a look what happened in Arkansas, a month or so ago. That was something that did not get a lot of coverage from the media. Obviously, the media is unfortunately on the side of the evildoers in this case.